And it is now officially 7:03. So in honor of our time, I do want to start welcoming Wendy O'Leary to our event tonight, introducing her book, It's Okay. I'm so thrilled for her to share some practices. Well, I'm going to share a little practice actually on, what has brought you joy this week. But before we do that, Wendy, can you just mention a little blurb about who you are and your newest book?
Sure. So I've been teaching mindfulness and skills for sort of emotional awareness and well-being, resiliency to children and adults, actually, for almost 20 years now.
Mm,
And I go into classrooms and I do professional development for teachers, and I do a lot of work in nonprofit organizations. So a lot of professional development with nonprofits, which is I used to work in nonprofits, so my heart is really there as well.
mm,
And my background is as a education in education, health educator, and I have three books out now. Really, I always say I'm a teacher who wrote books.
mhm.
There really is teaching tools. So for me, I look at everything I write. I have practices integrated into the stories. I want them to be opportunities for children and adults to use them for practice, and it's a way that I share those teachings a little more broadly. So my first two books, Breathing Makes It Better, co-authored with Chris Willard. The second book, The Monster Parade, and then the book that I'll be sharing about tonight, It's Okay, Being Kind to Yourself When Things Feel Hard. I'm really focusing on self-compassion practices for children.
Awesome. I know I'm looking forward to it. I imagine Barb is as well. But I would love, Barb, if you could put in the chat, I'm in Wendy, you as well. I'm going to put in the chat something that has brought you joy. Maybe it was today, maybe it was sometime this week, but let's do sometime in the past week. Let's see. Barb says the weather. I'm curious, we've had really good, I'm here in Houston, so we've had really, pretty good weather this week too. Let's see. I'm gonna say, I'm slower at typing right now. My brain is slower in the latter part of the day.
And I am as well. So it is 8 o'clock here. So we're getting close
Okay.
to bedtime.
Okay, this is something for sure that brought me joy. Let's see. Barb says the weather, reading your book today for the first time, and I got to see a middle school student of ours teach a lower school student of ours box breathing. It was tied into one of our ELA teachers who's doing a practice with a book, and they were just sharing a mindfulness practice with our lower school students. So that was super awesome to see, and it just definitely made me light up. So always great to start with that joy. Like all of a sudden I feel like a few shades brighter than I was just a moment ago.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like reading my book today, as I was reading it, and we were talking about, we actually did a breathing practice, and we
Mm,
might do one tonight.
that would be great.
But I had children who are preschool children and kindergarten children who were sharing that they were learning some of these practices in school. So they started saying, "Oh, I know this breathing practice," and they started sharing that. And for me, I think, which is part of why I'm so grateful to be with you tonight,
Mm,
is to see how these teachings and practices have really become more embedded in our society, our community, and particularly in our schools. When I
yes,
started
absolutely.
teaching this, I'd take out a breathing ball and no one had seen it, no one knew what I was about to do or had seen it before, or knew any breathing practices, and kind of, it was more difficult to get access. So it's lovely when I hear, about the work that you're doing and that this organization's doing. So I'm really grateful to be invited to be with
Thank
you tonight.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
So,
know those of us here and those of us watching when later on are really honored to be with you either live or later.
that's wonderful. And I'm very excited to share about this new book in particular. This book is really dear to me, and I often say that this is the book that I wish I had when I was a child.
Mm,
And I wrote this book with my younger self in mind. And it is a practice that I just think is so crucial for us to be teaching children and us as adults. So, what I'd love to do is to start with a practice that's kind of tied to the work of the book. So,
mm,
I always like to start with a practice whenever I'm teaching. So, my invitation would be, as you're comfortable and able, if you were able to close your eyes, if that felt okay with you this evening, and just letting the attention kind of drop into the body, feeling yourself seated here in this moment. So you may notice if the feet are on the floor, backs of the legs, on the chair, or cushion. You may notice the breath moving in the body. Just inviting the attention to gently rest on the sensations of the body. And then I'd like you to envision what might it be like if my heart were smiling. You might even bring a gentle smile to the lips and sense that felt sense of the body smiling, the heart smiling, emanating out to the rest of the body. You may, if it's comfortable for you this evening, take your hand and even gently placing it on the heart center, the center of your chest. Just noticing, what does that feel like? Can you offer kind touch through that hand to this being right here? Warmth and care and kindness. The inner friendliness of the smiling heart, the warmth and care of the soothing touch. And as you're ready, opening your eyes as we close this practice.
mm. That was lovely. Mhm.
So, just a couple things to sort of notice with that type of a practice, that there's actually like a physiological impact that we have when
Mm,
we do a practice like that. So the smile actually releases serotonin, and serotonin is a mood stabilizer. So when we offer that smile, it actually chemically helps to support our well-being. And when we offer that soothing touch offers the helps to release oxytocin, which is the feel good chemical, right? That
mm.
chemical and that felt sense of connection and care. And so offering those things to ourselves is a way that we can support ourselves and take care of ourselves. And so we'll talk a little bit about how this ties into practices around self compassion. But I thought I would share screen just to feel like I learn visually. So I always like to offer that to people. Ooh, let's do this one first. All right, I'm just going to move this. I was sharing earlier that technology is not always my forte. So
Aw,
here we
what
go.
a
We were
beautiful image. I love the art.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And so I do want to make sure to say Sandra Eade is the illustrator for this book, and she just did a lovely, lovely job and was wonderful to work with. Um, so doing those practices, the ways that we can invite in this felt sense of care and compassion to ourselves, how we offer that to ourselves. And of course, talking about self-compassion, one of the ways that we often talk about it is this idea of being a good friend to ourselves. And so, one of the ways that I say, and I'm going to kind of be going back and forth in our conversation tonight between how we offer it to ourselves as adults. And then I also want to share a little bit about ways that we can offer self compassion practices to support children in cultivating this skill. So, this idea of like, what would a friend say? Right? In the moment of difficulty, what would a friend say? And what would you say to a friend can often be a way that's helpful to think about self compassion and that self kindness. So, I always like to start with I feel like self compassion, we can talk about what it is, and I'm going to give sort of the formal definition as defined by Kristen Neff and Chris Germer, who are the individuals who designed the Mindful Self Compassion program. And in particular, Kristen did a lot of research around this, and she used this specific model. And my book actually is tied to that model. Chris Germer wrote the afterword for my book, and it does have the three parts in it. And for me, I really think it's so important to talk about the embodiment of the practice, the felt sense of these practices. So we can talk intellectually about what it is, but first, I want to make sure we're grounded in a felt sense of it. And so that's why we start with a practice like the smiling heart and the soothing touch. We want to feel like, what does it feel like in my body when I'm offering myself this kind of kindness? And so I tie that into this idea of what would a friend say? And I always share this story. And this is really a moment when self-compassion practices really, I had like an aha moment in terms of my own practice and teaching. And I had heard about self-compassion. I had actually done the mindful self-compassion program. And I always felt like self-compassion is already an embedded part of my mindfulness practice. And yet I had this moment where I realized if I pull it out a little more explicitly, there are some real benefits. And so I share this because this for me was also an embodied experience of self compassion. So many, many years ago, I was going through a really difficult time. And one of my dearest friends, I'm in the United States in Massachusetts, and one of my dear friends was in Australia for 3 months. And she's somebody who I would probably have been talking to probably daily. And we used to get together a few times a week. And so not having that support system in that moment was really difficult. And she sent me this email and it said, I want you to imagine that my love and care for you is like a warm blanket. And I want you to wrap that blanket around yourself and feel my love and my care and my holding of you in this difficult moment. And for me, that's that felt sense, right? Can we envision self compassion as this warm blanket that we're holding ourselves with? And to realize in that moment that that's what I did, right? I read her email, but then I envisioned it. I could bring that in and physically feel that felt sense of her care. But she wasn't there. There wasn't even a blanket there, right? It was me offering it to myself and realizing how powerful that was. So often, when we're in the midst of difficulty, it can be helpful to think, okay, because so often we give ourselves a hard time when maybe we feel we've made a mistake or something hasn't gone our way, to stop and say, what would a friend say to me in this moment? And so I had a child today in this when I was teaching and reading my book today. I had a little one come up to me and he said, Oh, I know what you mean. I had a friend, and this is a kindergartner. He said, I had a friend, they're a little older, and they were taking, here our standardized tests are called MCAS. And they were taking the MCAS test, and he said he had a sick belly and he was really nervous and worried. I said, oh, that must have been really hard. What did you say to him? He said, I said to him, it's okay. You know what? You're doing the best you can. And it was
That's
the
so cute.
sweetest thing. And, this little cherub face, right? Like it was just the sweetest thing. And I said to him, and so self-compassion is our being able to say that to ourselves when something is hard. Can you say that to yourself? Like, what's something that's hard for you? And he said, oh, sometimes I really have a hard time when I'm doing this drawing thing he was telling me about. And I said, and so maybe you could say that to yourself. It's okay. You're doing the best you can, right? So, what would a friend say? And flipping it around, which is what I did with him, is what would you say to a friend, right? He noticed, oh, when a friend's having a hard time, here's what I might say to that friend. And so helping to kind of turn that around then and say, okay, what would you say to a friend? Can you say that to yourself? Right. So if we can think about what would a dear friend say to us in the midst of difficulty and use that tone with ourselves, and what would we say to a friend? And of course, with children, and I'll dive more into how to teach it to children in a little bit, but to just say, right, lots of really fun practices we could do around like creating a friend, an inner friend. What would that look like? How would they talk? What would they say? Lots of different things along those lines. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I like to be clear about what self-compassion is as I am using it here. And so I do lean into the work of Kristen Neff and Chris Germer in terms of how I define self-compassion. And, I bring in other pieces. For me, this embodiment piece is really important, as I mentioned. But the three main components, I think, I have found personally to be really spot on, and really helpful in my own practice of self compassion. And so those are mindfulness, common humanity, and self kindness. So to just sort of break those apart, and people may already be familiar with this and with the practices and teachings of the Mindful Self Compassion Program, it's a really wonderful program and way to kind of deepen our capacity to offer ourselves compassion. So, mindfulness, the first piece, is just that capacity to really notice that things are difficult. Can we sort of get close to it and be able to acknowledge, right? Before we can offer kindness, we have to notice that things are hard. It's sort of like if you're walking down the street and somebody's struggling, you aren't going to feel compassion for them if you don't see it, right? You have to see the suffering to be able to offer compassion. And the same with ourselves. Sometimes we like to say, oh, no, that's fine. We're fine. I'm fine. It's not a big deal. And this isn't about wallowing in self pity. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's really about being able to say, "Ah, this is hard. Like, this is a moment of difficulty." We need to really acknowledge that. And of course, in our mindfulness practice, to know that we walk that middle road of being able to see it and acknowledge it without being swept up in the emotion, right? We don't over identify with it on the one hand, and we don't also push it away on the other. So we want to be able to see it clearly. Oh, this is hard. So often it could be like this is a moment of sadness, or yeah, I'm really having a hard time right now, right? Whatever words work for you. And so for me, a moment where I saw this sort of play out powerfully. And so I would say, like, that first moment I shared about the blanket, that was my first moment of really like getting more involved in the self compassion aspect of my own practice before I even started teaching it. And then during COVID was another moment for me where I was like, oh, these practices are what were calling to me in my own practice. These were the practices that I really was drawing on from my own support during COVID. And so I'm involved with an organization. It's a collaboration of many organizations that work in the early education field, right? And so here in the early education field, many of those places did not close down. They were actually taking in children from first responders. They were doing a lot of that caregiving and just like tapped out to the max and exhausted. So we would have our coalition meetings once a month and they were sharing stories and it was like it was hard. There was a lot of suffering and a lot of it's just a lot of difficulty. And
Mm,
they were dealing with their own and that of like all the people they
yeah.
were caring for, the children, the adult. It was like very heavy. And I am sort of I don't work in that field. I consult, I go into a lot of their programs, so they all know me, but um, I was really feeling in my heart, I just wanted to say, oh, this is hard. And as I was thinking it, somebody in the group just said, and this is a group of like 50, 60 people, somebody said over Zoom, oh, this is hard. And you could feel this like sigh go out throughout that Zoom room. Like you could feel it over the computer. This like release of just acknowledging the difficulty because we were
Mm,
all working so hard to plow through, you know?
yeah.
And I think we all kind of can remember how this felt. Teachers were in a similar situation, right? Parents
Hmm.
were taking care of their children who were being schooled at home. Like it was a really hard time. And just saying it was so powerful.
Yeah.
And
The
then,
acknowledgement.
right? That validation of like, this is what's actually happening. Just acknowledge it, validate it, and let it sit. And the minute she did that, and everybody then suddenly they were like, yeah, this is hard. Like, and we're all in this, and okay, we're going to figure this out together. Like, they had this added resiliency and capacity. You could feel a shift in the room in that moment. So, this mindfulness piece, we can't really work with something until we name it, acknowledge it, see it clearly. And that's why that piece is so crucial for a self compassion. So, we need to first see it. And it can be helpful to kind of have a framing for that. So for me, sometimes I might just name it simply, particularly if I'm doing a practice and I'm going to share the self compassion break practice, to just have like sort of one line that's mindfulness, like, oh, this is hard. Like that's often the line I use, or I'm having a hard time right now. This is hard, or this is a difficult moment. Having something to kind of help us name it in that moment. And then that second piece, common humanity, which for me, I'd had a mindfulness practice for so many years, but this common humanity piece, I think helps to diminish that added piece of judgment, right? Sometimes things are hard and then we isolate ourselves, we pull away, we think it's just us who's struggling, no one else is struggling. Like there's something about knowing that everyone feels upset sometimes. Like we were saying with the children today, a little girl shared something she was feeling sad about. And then one of the children said, I feel sad sometimes too. And I said, we all feel sad sometimes. That's part of being a person. It's just part of our common humanity. Sometimes things don't go our way and we might feel sad, or sometimes things are hard and sometimes we feel angry, like all of it, right? So this idea that it's not a mistake that we have a feeling that might be difficult, but that it's part of being human. And that capacity for common humanity keeps us from isolating, but also keeps us from that um, sort of walking down that line to more self pity, where we can get really enmeshed in the woe is me, right? We want to validate that things are hard, and we want to be able to do that in a way that we can also understand that and difficulty is a part of life. Sometimes things are hard. So that's kind of that quote, that John Kabat-Zinn quote, right? You can't
Hmm.
stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. Um, we all have waves,
Yeah, indeed.
right? And I think during COVID, especially, we all could see that. And they may be different, right? Um, and the emotions are the same, right? We have our stories are different, our level of experience, what we're dealing with it might be different, And we all have difficult moments. We all struggle in certain ways at different times. And so noticing that common humanity keeps us from sort of isolating, pulling away, helps us to kind of hold it with a little more spaciousness. And so the common humanity for me, sometimes when I'm doing a self-compassion break, we use each of these pieces and we might have like one line for each. So it might be for me, I might say, mindfulness, this is hard. And just like everyone else, I do the um, just like me, everyone else saying a lot. So just like me, everyone else feels, you know, feels bad about something sometimes or feels like they've made a mistake, just like everyone else. Sometimes I make a mistake, right? Like, so whatever it might be, I use that kind of framing to remind myself that it's human to make mistakes. I might even just say it's human to make a mistake, or it, it's normal to have a hard time sometimes. So common humanity, the second piece. And then that third piece, and you notice I do this all the time, and I've always done this. It's just an automatic for me, but this is that way that I offer myself kindness, like, and also over Zoom in particular, when other people are having a hard time, I notice I do this like as an offering to them as well. But can we offer ourselves a bit of kindness? And the question in self-compassion is, what do I need? Right?
Mm.
In this moment, what do I need? And so simply offering ourselves a little bit of kindness in that moment can make a huge difference. So the three pieces might be mindfulness. So just to break it down, mindfulness. So say I'm having a difficult moment. And the beauty of this self-compassion break is that you can use it on the spot, right? I can sit and practice in my formal meditation practice, and I can bring up an incident that I'm having a hard time with and use it. And I can also use it in the midst of my life. I'm in a meeting and something happens and I'm upset about it. I can say, oh, this is hard. And just like me, everybody gets frustrated sometimes. And then my self kindness often is, it's okay, I'm here for you. That's the one that I use a lot.
Yeah.
It's whatever words you need to hear in that moment, right? And then it might be that you take it further than that and you go talk to a friend or you get a cup of tea or you go out for a walk, right? But in the moment, we can just offer ourselves kind words right there. And we can offer ourselves that soothing touch. So I thought we could do just a really brief, I'm just looking at my time, a real brief self-compassion break. So I'd invite you again to, if you're able to, and it's okay with you, to close your eyes and just dropping back in again, right here in this moment. And then bringing up in your mind in an incident, a situation that it might be a little difficult. So, not the most difficult thing. We start practicing with the littler things, right? But something that maybe brings a little activation. And if a lot of things come to mind, just pick one. You can practice with the others later. And then once you have that, begin our self compassion break with mindfulness, simply acknowledging. Could be specifically what the feeling is, the predominant feeling. Oh, this is a moment of sadness or frustration or even anger, disappointment, whatever it might be. Or simply, oh, this is hard. And then the common humanity, the reminder that everyone deals with hard things sometimes. Whatever phrase works for you in your situation to remind you of common humanity. And then an offering of kindness to yourself. So it could be soothing touch, a hand on the heart. Sometimes people like to give themselves a little squeeze on the shoulders, like a little hug. Or even what words? What could you say to yourself that would be an offering of kindness in this moment? It's okay, I'm here for you. I've got you. I'm right here. So mindfulness, common humanity, and self kindness. And as you're ready, opening your eyes to close the practice. So the reminder is you don't need to close your eyes. Like it's great to do this practice formally a few times to kind of get the hang of it, but I do this on the spot often. This is like a go-to practice for me. And the more you do it, the more sort of it will rise up for you in a moment that you need it. And as an offering to yourself, and sometimes I have some shortcuts. So I'll share my shortcut for the self-compassion practice. And that is what I like to call my of course, honey practice. And that is, yeah, I'm like, how do I offer this to myself really like in a way that feels for me very genuine and also kind of rises really easily? And so there are often for many of us particular emotions that we don't want to feel and that I mean, many of these emotions that can be difficult feel unpleasant. So there's that. So we wouldn't want to feel them because of that. So there can be some aversion. And one way that I work with that is to really validate the feeling, right? Of course you feel angry, honey. Anyone would feel angry in this situation. It's okay. I'm here for you. We've got this, right? So the of course, honey, for me often combines the mindfulness and that common humanity.
Mm,
Doesn't add that second arrow, that extra blame for having whatever the difficult emotion is, because I think we very often add that piece. And that's what the common humanity helps us to kind of alleviate. So I use my, of course, honey practice all the time, and I find that to be helpful. So that's my variation on the self-compassion break.
I love it.
So the one piece that I think is really important to stress is to make sure we're really clear on it, our intention. And so I always say when we're using self-compassion and integrating self-compassion, and really, it's really a perspective. Like, yes, it's a skill, but it's also just a way of being in the world, right? It's a way of being with ourselves, particularly in difficult moments, right? So self-compassion is really kindness is when we're just offering kindness to ourselves or others. Self-compassion and compassion to others is when we're offering kindness in a moment of difficulty, right? And we do that not to make the difficulty go away. And that I think is a really important thing to remember. So if we're doing it thinking, well, that's going to make it go away and get rid of feelings, again, then we're into aversion as opposed to the of course, honey, right? We want to really welcome the feeling, validate the feeling. And what's interesting is when we offer the care and kindness, though, compassion and self compassion activate the parts of the brain that actually have to do with the feel good hormones. So it does make us feel better, doesn't make the problem go away. And the simple act of feeling cared for, even cared for by ourselves, does make us feel better. So I liken it to, when a child hurts themselves, and so, yeah, you might put a band-aid on if they need bigger help than that. You do that, right? To actually take care of the problem. But often we give them a little kiss, right? A little kiss on the cheek, oh, honey, or a little hug. It does not make the boo-boo better, right? But it makes them feel better because they're being cared for. And that's what we're doing to ourselves. We're giving ourselves a little kiss on the cheek or a little kiss on the forehead. It's the way that we show that kindness and care to ourselves. So we feel better because we're cared for. We give ourselves that compassion, not to get rid of the feelings. simply because we feel bad. It's the only prerequisite, right? Otherwise, it's kindness. But if we're offering ourselves compassion, all that's required is that we're feeling bad. And so we can offer ourselves compassion in any moment. And so the encouragement is to kind of set an intention to, we were talking earlier before we started about inclining the mind towards joy,
Yeah.
right? Because of the negativity bias. And we can also incline the mind to notice this idea of how we treat ourselves in a moment of difficulty and being curious and interested in offering ourselves a little bit of kindness and compassion. Um, Sort of setting a little bit of an intention. Intention's really powerful. So can we set an intention to be a little kinder to this being? Right? Because many of us are caretakers of others, particularly educators, are always focused on caretaking of others. And so this is a moment to say, and I set an intention to also care for this person right here. And in truth, if we don't care for ourselves, and I know this, people say this all the time, and it's so true. And so I think it does bear repeating. If we don't take care of ourselves, we don't have as much to give, right? What we're able to give ourselves, what we fill our cup with, right, is what we're able to give to others. So it's really important for us to do this. And lots of research around burnout prevention and self-compassion, lots of research around resiliency and self-compassion. So it's a lovely way to support ourselves and to know in doing so, we're also supporting those we care for. And then the last piece I would just say is that many of us have a sort of the habitual way of not being so kind to ourselves, right? That critic, we might all resonate with that. And so those are like long worn habits in the mind. And so we also, even if we set an intention to be compassionate to ourselves, we don't then want to use that as another thing to beat ourselves up about if we're not. So to just notice being, you set this intention to be a little kinder to yourself. And when you aren't, be kind to yourself about that, right? And when you are, take that in. Oh, that was a moment where I was able to offer myself some kindness. Because the more we start to notice it, we let it kind of start to cultivate those new neural pathways. We want to stop and notice it, to let it sink in, be present for the moments of being kind to ourselves and not give ourselves a hard time when we aren't, because it's just our conditioning. And so what happens often, and this is usually a much longer workshop, so I'm just kind of want to touch on a couple of key pieces here.
Yeah, of course.
So just a few things to consider, right? When things don't go our way, and whether that's externally, like something difficult is happening in our life, or when we feel like we've made a mistake and we're giving ourselves a hard time, we weren't that not good enough feeling that many of us can have. What happens internally in terms of our nervous system is that fight, flight, freeze response turns on us, right? So often we're now seeing ourselves as the threat, and we turn our threat defense system on ourselves. So that fight might show up as our self-critic. And it's really helpful to start to just notice that critic. And if you stop and think of a friend who's going through a difficult situation and what you might say to them, and we don't have the time to do it, but I encourage you to play with this. And then stop and think about what you might say to yourself when you're going through a hard time. And notice the difference in those voices, the tone, what you say, um, how your body even feels while you're doing it. Like, is there a tightness in your body when you're talking to yourself? Feeling softer, more warm, inviting, leaning into the friend, to just really notice, because that self-critic, we want to start paying attention to notice. That's, and it's trying to protect us, and yet it often becomes then this voice that can be very harmful. And so we want to start to notice that self-critic. Flight can look like avoidance, shame, isolation, and freeze is when we start to ruminate and over-identify. So that's when, like, we said something to someone yesterday and we keep rehashing the conversation. I said it that way. They probably thought this. Maybe if I had said that, I should have, maybe the next time I talk to them, I'll say it differently, right? We have this whole thing that we do. And this is part of our humanity. We all do it. And this is kind of how that threat defense system is activated. All it is our nervous system trying to protect us. And there's another system that supports us when we feel threatened, and that is the care and soothe system. And so self compassion activates that part of our nervous system. So it can help to down regulate sort of the amygdala, the alarm part of our brain, right? That activates all of these responses. And it can support, again, the release of oxytocin, decreasing cortisol. It increases our heart rate variability, which is really good for our physical health and our well being. So it also makes it safe to make mistakes. So if I haven't sold you on self compassion yet, this for me is a huge one. When we can, when we can be kind to ourselves, even if we make a mistake, we're not as afraid of trying things, right? We go a little out of our comfort zone. I often say, like, I never would have written a book if it wasn't for my self compassion practice. Putting something like that out there into the world, it felt so vulnerable. And I've never, like, writing is not even something I ever thought I would do. So it's something that was really unimaginable before I had this practice. And to know that, again, when we're working with children, that kindness and curiosity turn on the learning centers in the brain, right? So not only does it make it safe to make mistakes, it also increases our capacity to learn from them. And that is really important. So if we can activate that part of our brain, we can activate that part of our nervous system, we're supporting learning, we're supporting a little more resilience, we're opening up that window of tolerance for people. It's a really wonderful practice. And for me, I find it so interesting because people think of it often as this soft, touchy-feely thing. And in my opinion, and in my experience, and in my work with people, this is probably one of the strongest skills we can have. Like, self-compassion is an incredible, incredible strength and a reliable source of support. So to remember that when we offer ourselves self-compassion, it's dependent on nothing. So we talk a lot about self-esteem. Self-esteem is contingent upon comparison and competition and feeling like we are good at, better than, in many ways. Whereas self compassion is just dependent on being kind to ourselves because we just like everyone else deserve kindness. We just like everyone else have hard times sometimes, make mistakes sometimes, say things we regret sometimes, do things we regret sometimes. Um, and we can offer ourselves that kindness. So my encouragement is to dive a little deeper. I'm hoping to kind of plant some interest for people to dive deeper into some of these practices, and hopefully also encourage you to sort of look at them in terms of how you would offer them for children, because I think it's just such a crucial thing for us to be offering children. So one of the ways that I talk about it with children is I'll talk about self-compassion growing. How do we grow self-compassion? So the soil is the mindfulness, the rain is the common humanity, right? The rain falls on all of us, and the sun is the self-kindness. And you can do lots of different creative things around that. So just to share, like, this is like my soil. I don't know if you can see it. So here it says, how are you feeling? This is hard. This is a down moment, I feel, right? So we can have different words up that identify what are some of the ways that we can remind ourselves of how to be mindful when we're having a difficult moment. And then we could have, let's see. And then we have our rain.
It's cute.
Big raindrop. Of course you feel. It makes sense that you feel. Everyone feels, with the blank sometimes. Things feel hard for everyone sometimes.
Mm.
And so what you could do is even having the, using for discussion. When I go into classrooms, sometimes I'll use these big ones for discussion, but then the children can make littler ones and write words that work for them.
Yeah.
And so the son, what do you need? It's okay. I'm here for you. You can do this. So there's also strong self-compassion, right?
Mhm.
Kristen Neff's book, Fierce Self-Compassion, is all about that. And for me, that's sort of the being a good coach for yourself, a little encouragement sometimes, right? You know what? You can do this. You've got this. That's sort of my coach voice. You matter, right? So we can have that. And so one of the things that I'll do sometimes for children is I think having visuals and having something tactile to work with is
Yeah.
really helpful. So we can make like and I use sometimes for a lot of things, I'll use bags only because it's so easy, they can put things in them. So we might make our flower of self-compassion, and then inside they could have smaller versions of those, or just reminders. Another option is, what are some of the things that you do to take good care of yourself when things are hard? So I have here a caring touch and a hug, or caring action. I could go play. Caring words, I love you, honey. Right? What are the different things that we could do? Or we could just have little cards and they could write different things, or have for little ones. Sometimes I'll use pictures that they
Mhm.
can use. Um, so lots of different ways. And then like the practice that we did earlier, the inner smile practice. Sometimes I'll just make like a little smile. This is, this is my smiling heart. Um,
Cute.
and we can take rocks, like feeling rocks. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've ever done, I did a lot of these with the Monster Parade. So like this is, my sad, you see my sad monster.
Yeah.
And oh, I'm feeling really sad. And again, you could have a real visual out somewhere where if you're having a big feeling, you can put it inside that smiling heart. Like the smiling heart can hold all of it. All the feelings can be held here in the smiling heart. And on the back, I have things that help. A hug, hug my stuffed animal, or play with the pet. These were things that children said when I was in a classroom. So we can do a lot of sort of different activities like that with children. These are just a couple. So the last one that I'll share, and then I'm going to share a little bit from my book, is compassion cocoa. So I have my little compassion cocoa, and here are my chocolate chips. So this one says love, and I have one that says fun, and I want to be included. What are the things that I need in this moment? And so we know that when we breathe out, when we blow out, it expands and lengthens the exhale, which calms the nervous system. So this particular practice includes self-compassion, it includes a longer exhale, and it also is a well-wishing to others. So we do a little visualization. They can think of a time they felt really happy or loved. We can put that love into our compassion cocoa, that feeling of being cared for, or think of a time when they felt included and they were part of something that made them feel good. Put it in our compassion, then we stir it up, and then we smell the cocoa, taking it in for ourselves, and then we blow it out, sending it out to everyone in the classroom, to everyone in the building, to everyone in our, everyone that we know, and then everyone everywhere in the end. So it incorporates a couple of different practices like that. So just a few little, and I'm sure like as educators, such a super creative bunch of people that, playing with these ideas and coming up with other ideas that resonate for you as ways to share these practices with children, keeping in mind that intention of those key components, right? Mindfulness, common
Mhm.
humanity, and self-kindness, and encouraging children to know they can be kind to themselves in the midst of whatever's happening.
Those are cute.
Yeah,
I like the compassion cocoa. I love all the practices, but that one's cute. Yeah.
yeah, and I did that one today with the children,
Yeah.
and it was really sweet. And I think that reminding them too to offer it, like we're taking it in for ourselves, and we can offer it to other people. And so I think, and what we know from the research is that people who rate higher in self-compassion also rate higher in compassion for others. So
Mhm.
to remember that as we feel more comfortable offering it to ourselves, it enhances our capacity to offer it to others as well. So I thought that I would share. I'm gonna see if I can get out of the slideshow. Ooh, so just the last one, and we don't have time to do this last set of practices, but to just say we are going to end with the closing practice. But I did want to just say that it is, I mentioned that fierce self-compassion. So that's the tenderness from the open front, the strength, right, from a strong back, the fierce part of the self-compassion, that strength and stability, and then the capacity to be open and soft from the front, combining those two energies of self-compassion. Talked a little bit about this question, what do I need? And then as educators in particular, a practice of one for me and one for you would simply be offering in the inhale what you need, and on the exhale, offering them what they need. So particularly if you're dealing with, and we did this one a lot during COVID, in groups that I was in, we would do taking it in for us as the caregivers. What do I need in this moment? And then as we breathe out, offering. So if I need love for me, love for you, or strength for me, strength for you, kindness for me, kindness for you. So thinking really and starting with you, right? We want to start here first and just do it with the in breath. And then as we feel capacity, then on the out breath, offering to others. And that is a part taken straight out of the Mindful Self-Compassion program. That's a practice that they teach. So I thought that I would share a little bit of my book if I can figure
Yeah, that'd be great.
out. Here we go. All right. So I stopped sharing, but now I'm gonna share again because this is my technological lack of, sorry, here we go.
You're doing great.
There it is. All right.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you. So I'll just read a little bit of it. So it's okay being kind to yourself when things feel hard. And again, the illustrator is Sandra Eade. Sometimes things don't go the way I want. I feel sad and it's hard. Then I remember that everyone feels sad sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say: it's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. Sometimes I make a mistake. I feel really bad. Then I remember that everyone feels bad sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say: it's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. Sometimes I have to do something I don't want to do. I feel really angry. Then I remember that everyone feels angry sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say: it's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. Sometimes I can't do something no matter how hard I try. I feel frustrated. Then I remember everyone feels frustrated sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say: it's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. Sometimes my fun plans get canceled. I feel so disappointed. Then I remember that everyone feels disappointed sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say: it's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. Sometimes I'm not included. I feel so hurt. Then I remember that everyone feels hurt sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say: it's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. Sometimes I think something bad might happen. I feel so worried. Then I remember everyone feels worried sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say: it's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. Sometimes I think I'm just not special. I feel like I'm not good enough. Then I remember that everyone feels not good enough sometimes. I put my hand on my heart, and here's what I say. It's okay. I love you. I'm with you today. And then at the back of the book, there are some activities for people to try.
I love it. It's beautiful. Thank you.
You.
Yeah.
And so for me, teaching children, even having that little hand on the heart and having that little phrase that they can go to. And then what I often will say is, and you want to find something to say that feels good for you, but can you tell yourself you love yourself? Like that's, and it's interesting. Little ones have a much easier time with it than we adults do. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
right?
Yeah, I think that's why it's so magical to work with children. It reminds us of that inner child, that inner spark. But that's such a beautiful book. And I love the practices that you shared, absolutely. And I love that it was a practice itself through the reading of the book. It's also one of my favorites, the hand on the heart. Oftentimes, even during difficult moments, I'm just doing it automatically, as you were saying. Many of the students that I've taught to also love that practice, and I can't wait to share your book with others. It's really beautiful. I didn't get to mention that the soil and the rain and the sun activities, super cool that you tied that to the model, the self-compassion model, or with the mindfulness, the common humanity, self-compassion. I love it. So I hope those that are listening anytime, Barb, with you now or others listening later, these are great practices that you can add into your everyday, whether you're working with kids in a traditional school setting at home, in any organization, anything that you're doing with kids. These are great. And it was definitely gave me some inspiration too. So I appreciate you, Wendy. It's been
Thank
awesome to have you here tonight.
And
Yeah.
just to say, it's great if people think about adding it into the work they do, but also do it for yourself, please.
Yeah. I want to make my own compassion cocoa.
Yeah. I had a little one today say, I think I can smell it. It was cute. It was
I
very
love that.
cute.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
But
Barb
like,
says definitely can use with my kiddos. She says,
oh,
thank
great.
you. Yeah.
Thank you,
That's been
Barb.
awesome.
So
Well,
most
thank you
welcome.
so much. Barb, did you have any questions for Wendy before we close out? I feel so relaxed now, Barb, from just you going through that book. And no, it was very relaxing. I agree, Barb. It was very relaxing, very grounding, and super grateful for you, Wendy, sharing your light out in the world.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful
Yeah.
meeting you too. Yeah.
All right.
Good luck
Thank
with all
you.
your work for everyone who's out there,
Thank you.
little ones. Take care. Thank you.
Barb says thank you. All right, Barb. I'll
Thank you,
see you
Barb.
hopefully at the next event. You've been one of our